Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can react to a video that Jaclyn Glenn made about the Shane Dawson video about Eugenia, right? So there's a few different steps here, some links to get to the point, right? So what do I think of this Jaclyn Glenn video? And the other question here would be, how do we help somebody who doesn't want help or who is potentially being blocked from getting care, right? So many people know about the backstory here, so just very briefly, Shane Dawson does this video about Eugenia, who's a YouTube content creator that lost a lot of weight and eventually was treated for an eating disorder. We don't know which one. Shane interviews her, and in the course of this interview, in his video, we see that in general, it really has kind of a positive feel, like things are getting better. So after that, we see this response video from Jaclyn Glenn, and I guess two friends of hers. I don't really know the whole story there because I'm not really familiar with her channel at all. But either way, her and a couple friends, and they're indicating that they really have something to say. So before I get too much further into this, all the people that I mentioned here are, of course, real people. So it's important to note that I'm not diagnosing anybody here, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. I also don't know if any of the information in Jaclyn Glenn's video, for that matter, any of the videos I'm talking about, is reliable. The only thing I know certain from the Jaclyn Glenn video, the only thing I know like 100%, is that the 20 minutes I spent watching it are 20 minutes that I will never get back, right? This was a long video, really very poorly planned. I don't think there's really two ways about that, kind of rambling. I think a script may have helped just to organize the thoughts. It seemed kind of like free association a little bit. But stepping away from my criticisms about the video, they do touch on an important issue. And I can appreciate the emotions behind that, right? So we see from the long video and then from a short video that was made in response to the first video being too long, we see that the gravamen of their complaint is that Eugenia is still in danger from eating disorders and some other problems. And secondarily, they are mad because they were made out to be bullies. So ostensibly, they are the ones being referred to by Eugenia in the Shane Dawson video when she indicates that some people are trying to pressure her into treatment. Alright, so I'll address this in a few stages. So first, the first thought I have here is, should all this really be public? Does making a video that's going to be viewed by probably millions of people eventually really help Eugenia? Even if everything they said in the video is true, which of course is something I don't know. I agree sometimes that the public can do things that wouldn't otherwise be done. The phrase public pressure kind of comes to mind. But really, in terms of their complaints, all this could be handled by the authorities. It sounds like they believe that Eugenia is being manipulated by her mother and maybe by a driver and maybe by other people. I don't know. But it really sounds like a job for law enforcement who could act directly or report it to the appropriate state agency. Now, I know they did reach out to mental health professionals and law enforcement. We have this whole 5150 situation that I'll talk about. I'll get to all that in a moment. So here in this video, we see some details that do not seem to be conducive to recovery. So even if they wanted to kind of get their points across, they added some details that I don't know if they're really necessary. Like the information about tricking Eugenia to get her out of the house so that they could call the mental health professionals to talk to her and eventually have that 5150. Information about Eugenia screaming and yelling at them, kind of resisting the idea of being treated. Again, even if this is true, was it a good idea to put all those details out to all the people that would watch the video? Now, in terms of their feelings of betrayal, I mean Jaclyn and her friends here in this video, their feelings, why not cope alone with these feelings or use each other for support? Why involve the millions of people that will watch the video? It really seems like a private matter more than a public matter, and kind of upstages the real issue that they're trying to talk about, which is the safety of Eugenia. So I guess I just don't see the advantage in this tactic. I don't really see the video as being necessary. Although I suppose that being necessary isn't really one of the boxes that people check before they make videos, right? This is a criticism of a lot of different channels. So it's really not clear here that they exhausted all the other remedies in the situation although I guess they're really trying to make this argument that they did. Sometimes the answer you get when you pursue treatment on behalf of somebody else isn't the answer you want. I've been in a ton of situations as a mental health counselor where I was really powerless to take action, and the outcome for the people that I wanted to help was very bad. I mean, very bad. Very poor outcomes sometimes. It's really about a balance here between freedom and security. That's what's really at issue here. It's a philosophical debate beyond the scope of this video. But Eugenia, and everyone else for that matter, has autonomy and rights. And only under extreme circumstances will those rights be abrogated by the state. Now, in the situation that Jaclyn's talking about, of course, as I mentioned before, there was a 5150 hold put into effect. And as I'm to understand it, Jaclyn and her friends had something to do with that. Now, the 5150 is California's involuntary assessment law. It's a 72-hour hold. After the assessment takes place with the 5150, mental health professionals can recommend a 5250, which is 14 days of intensive treatment, right? So that's how that works. We have an assessment that's involuntary and then a commitment that's involuntary. Although, of course, when somebody's being assessed, they can't go anywhere, so in a sense, they're committed. Now, in the state of Delaware, where I live, it's a 24-hour hold, Title 16, Chapter 50 of the Delaware Code. And then we have something called involuntary commitment, which involves a lot of lawyers and judges. It's actually pretty similar in many ways to what we see in other states. It's also not easy to get. But either way, if that was the case, if they intervened in the way they said they did, and they were able to get law enforcement to use the 5150, then they really did everything that they could do, right, in a sense. The larger picture, though, right, the larger issue here, beyond Eugenia and Jaclyn and all these other people, is how do you help somebody with a mental disorder if they don't want you to help them? And the reality here is sometimes you can't. I'm a mental health counselor, and sometimes I can't. I know a number of lawyers, judges, police officers, workers at different state agencies, physicians, and sometimes they can't help either. That doesn't mean we don't try, and that doesn't mean that we can't help in every situation. But we do need to face the reality that sometimes there really is nothing more we can do. Sometimes we can't even do anything, right? There's just nothing we can do based on the situation. Now, here in Delaware, as I mentioned, we have a 24-hour hold, and it requires somebody to be a danger to others or a danger to themselves. Again, most states are similar with this particular type of law, this set of laws. The danger has to be imminent, not a potential danger that could be far in the future, which means certain behaviors really don't fall under this law very often. For example, someone who slowly drinks themselves to death, or someone who slowly starves themselves to death, right? Mental health clinicians have a lot more power when the threat is clear, is happening right now, or is going to happen very soon. Although, just to be clear, I have seen people put on a 24-hour hold and involuntarily committed because of anorexia nervosa, one fairly common type of eating disorder. Now, even when a 24-hour hold is put in place, if somebody is not involuntarily committed for a longer duration due to the assessment of that hold that took place during that hold, we see that they can just leave, right? The bar is actually very high to get somebody involuntarily committed. We see it once in a while with disorders like schizophrenia, sometimes bipolar disorder with psychotic features, and a few other disorders, but again, it's not very common. Adding to the difficulty is that inpatient care is extremely expensive. And if the state's going to have to pay for that, they're really kind of incentivized to move people along, right? So typically people don't stay in state inpatient care for very long. And outpatient care, no matter who's delivering it, is very hard to manage effectively when somebody's involuntarily committed. So we have some logistical problems in terms of how commitment aligns with the services that are available and the cost of those services. Sometimes people ask me why it's necessary to explore involuntary commitment in the first place, right? So why do some people refuse to be treated for mental illness when it's fairly clear they have a mental illness? Well, there are a number of reasons. Sometimes it's because of a break from reality. We refer to this as psychosis. And psychosis has symptoms like hallucinations, seeing and hearing things other people can't see and hear, and delusions, which are fixed false beliefs. Now, sometimes we also see another condition called anosognosia. It's a lack of insight, and it's actually a symptom of many mental disorders. It's when somebody's not aware that they have a mental disorder, or they're not aware of the danger that the mental disorder puts them in. Psychosis is often clear, and it's much more likely to result in a 24-hour hold. Anosognosia is subtle, and it's fairly difficult to work with in terms of a 24-hour hold. It's difficult to get that established when we're just working with anosognosia and not some type of psychosis. Now, there are some other reasons, too, why people don't want to be treated for mental disorders. We see that some mental disorders are episodic, so there are good times and bad times, for a lack of a better way to put that. So sometimes during the good times, somebody is more aware, so they can talk their way out of involuntary treatment, or set themselves up in a situation where they would be unlikely to be visited by people that could force them into treatment when things are going badly. So another way of putting it is they can be more prepared to deal with the bad times in terms of avoiding treatment. We also see other factors that could interfere, like paranoia. If somebody's paranoid, they're not going to want to receive treatment. That kind of makes sense. They're worried that somebody's out to get them, and they don't trust treatment professionals. If somebody's antagonistic, that could also play a role. If somebody's really disagreeable. And these could be associated characteristics with several mental disorders, both paranoia and antagonism. Sometimes people want to engage in a behavior that's linked to the mental disorder, like drinking, stealing, mistreating people. So put another way, sometimes people believe that the treatment will take something away that they like, right? So they don't want to give up a potential benefit of an associated characteristic of a mental disorder. Last, sometimes somebody else could be blocking care, right? And this is mentioned in Jaclyn's videos. I don't know if that is happening here. Again, there's no way for me to know, but I have seen this happen in other situations. It is a real thing. Usually, though, there's some sort of clear motive, like money. Rarely it could be something like Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which is really factitious disorder imposed on another. That's the technical name for it. Most of the time, though, in my experience, I found it to be laziness or lack of awareness, right? Somebody's just not concerned or doesn't care to be concerned with somebody who needs help, so they block them from getting care. It's just inconvenient for them to help out, so they decide to interfere. It is hard to intervene when there's a situation like this, unfortunately. The law really offers little remedy for those types of situations, right? So people really do what they can do. Mental health professionals do what they're able to do. But if you're really looking at a situation where somebody's actively trying to block somebody else from getting care, you really do have to be diligent and alert all the authorities that would have jurisdiction in that situation. It's a very unfortunate situation. And if it's happening in a situation like this with Eugenia, that's quite sad. I'm not sure what can really be done about that. I don't know if making videos and making it all public and everything is really the way to go. I'm not aware of clear evidence that points to some sort of blocking of care. I mean, they mention a few things, but again, we don't know how reliable those statements would be, or if there's emotions involved in making those statements. There's really just too many unknown factors. I think my point is, it's just a difficult situation, right? So there's some times in mental health care where we run into brick walls, and we have to find ways, legal and appropriate ways, to get around those barriers, and sometimes we can't get around those barriers. So I know whenever I talk about issues like this, like situations like eating disorders and people not getting the treatment they need and all these types of situations, there'll be a variety of opinions, people who agree with me and disagree with me, and have other thoughts and examples from their own experience. Please put those opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate a really interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found this description of the difficulties of helping people who don't want help to be interesting. Thanks for watching.